This conference will now be recorded.
And welcome everyone to the March 2022 Cataloging Interest Group meeting. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you on this just weird weather continuing kind of afternoon here on the East Coast and around the country and around the world, really. So I am Jennifer Weston. I always forget to introduce myself. I'm the facilitator of this group, and I work with really wonderful people in the organizing committee to be able to bring you programs every month and to continue our discussions. Thank you all for being here today. I really do, Elaine mentioned before we got started offhand, this is really one of those meetings I look forward to every month. So thanks you all for being here. Our agenda today is going to take us into a very specific conversation here for the last part, but we'll start with our regular standing agenda items and then a couple of just community announcements. And then we're going to talk about Evergreen Holdings templates. I would like, since you've all got access to the chat there, as I'm continuing to talk about the welcome and announcements, you'll just drop me a note and let me know if there's anyone out there who hasn't worked with templates. That'll really influence how quickly I talk through my introduction to holdings templates until we get to talking about what we would like for them to be able to do, because this is really a review of current functionality and then potential wish list kind of functionality. We like to bring the community together to talk about these things to reach a consensus so that we can kind of build some momentum around it. So yeah, so if anybody that hasn't used holdings templates, please let me know, and I will make sure that I provide as much background information as we need to. So let's get started with our welcome and general announcements. I've already done the welcome. Last week, I believe it was just last week, I sent out a survey to the listserv. This is open until next Friday, the 18th. We did one of these, I think it's 2 years ago now when we went back to try to, 2020. So it has been almost 2 years since we've done one. We just like to gauge the interest of the cataloging community in general, whether you're able to attend these meetings regularly or you just are able to come to one or two of them. We like to make sure that we're getting input about the kinds of activities that we have. Activity sounds like it's recreation center. The kinds of discussions that we have and the kind of proposals and presentations that we're working on as a community, so that these are beneficial for you, because that's the really point of this interest group, is to get together and talk about things that are of interest to catalogers in the Evergreen community, and this is one way we'll do it. Thank you to everyone who has completed that survey already. I really do appreciate it. It is anonymous unless you don't want it to be. There's a place on there that you can provide your email address if you want us to respond to you directly. For those of you that have provided your email address, rest assured I'll get back to you. One of us will, sometime very soon. I was going to say this week, but certainly by the end of next week. There's the cataloger survey. Evergreen Conference, we've already made the announcement for. It's going to be in June. More momentum is gaining behind that. So there is a link there to the conference website. Registration is open. Call for proposals is open. And I wanted to just put in a plug there. If you are considering suggesting a proposal for the Evergreen Conference related to catalogers, please let us know. We'd like to promote that. And also, if you have an idea but you're not sure you want to present on something all by yourself, please let us know. And by us, I mean you can either email the cataloging listserv, or you can just email one of us on the organizing committee that you know and have our email addresses. All of our email addresses are on the wiki, I believe. So if you just are looking for somebody to present with, or you just want to run your idea by somebody, that's what community is for. So please let us know. We intend to have a good selection of programs this year. The organizing committee will talk about this as we get a little closer to the conference too, to see what kind of proposals have been presented and see if there's anything that that comes out of the survey that we might want to pick up and discuss, either as kind of a, we're going to have meetings just for catalogers during this time. There's that, those rooms that we can stay open and just have informal meetings, but then we'll also look at the formal session presentations too. So here's your opportunity to influence what happens at the conference as far as content for catalogers. And that's it for Evergreen Conference. Evergreen release notes and resources. Nothing new to report there, which is not unusual. Bunch of March, other than under celebrations. If you saw this release note come out from Mike Rylander, who is heading up the release team for 3.9. I think it went out to the dev listserv, so if you missed it, that's fine. That's the reason we bring together information from all the different interest groups when we do get together. Evergreen 3.9 is underway, the planning for it, which in my humble understanding also means 3.8.1, so it'll be a release update to point release for 3.8. The tentative dates right now that are released, bug squashing the week of April 4th, final release around April 27th. Those dates could very easily change. The thing that we're celebrating here today is that planning has started. In fact, the dev group always meets the hour after hours every month. So at 3 o'clock Eastern, or at when our meeting's wrapping up, they'll just be getting started with theirs. So I would say look for more information soon from that group as they talk about what 3.9 might look like. But that's exciting information for us. It means more opportunity for us to do some bug squashing in April and see what's out there. I quickly skipped over all those links there for Evergreen release notes and resources. If you are new to our group, I usually stop to say our agenda turns into our official account, our official notes of this meeting. And this will be up and on the wiki later today. The agenda the recording will be available by Friday. So these links are out to the official community documentation. Tabular release notes is one that's maintained by this group. So you can see what's kind of happens through each release. There's a tab there for each, 3.8, 3.7, so forth. If you're interested in what the latest release is, we've just got a quick cheat sheet there on the latest resources tab to just remind us. And then, of course, there's a link to community demo servers. If you don't have access to one of the to 3.8, which many of us would not, if you just want to have a quick look at it and kind of play around with some of that functionality, please feel free. Community demo servers are on 3.8, and there if you follow that login, there's a link to the login information. If you follow that link, there is login information to that demo server so that you can kind of play around with some of that yourself. As we talk about functionality in 3.8, I think it's only fair that you're able to see it too at other times other than in these meetings. Okay, so time to celebrate our other interest groups in the Evergreen community. And I've got the dates on there when the interest groups meet. The only real change here is Reports Interest Group has announced that they are now meeting monthly, which is fantastic. They were meeting bi-monthly. So they will meet next on March 30th. Other than that, I think these are just your regular meeting dates. For each of these, we will not have bug squashing dates, of course, until the schedule is finalized. It gets a little closer to being ready for 3.9 for bug squashing. And if you're new to the concept of bug squashing, it just means they release kind of a test version of the newest functionality of Evergreen, and we get to go in and test it and provide feedback on it based on very specific things that have been reported from bug squashing. So bug squashing, they're trying to address some of the things that have been noted in a bug, and this is how we squash them. Okay, that's about as far as I can take that metaphor right now. So trying to pull out any notes I'd seen come across just the community listservs. Outreach committee, they're still looking for volunteers for the annual report. That's still ongoing. So you can contact Rogan if you have any questions there, or Andrea. And documentation interest group, the DIG audit project is continuing. There is a link there to the full document, the full official document that the documentation interest group has put together. And I've also got a document there that's just, if you're curious, you don't want to spend time worrying about formatting one way or the other about things that you find in the documentation that's either missing or incorrect or just basically needs updating, and you want to drop it just on a shared doc somewhere, please use this shared doc. You can just put any kind of notes you want in any kind of format on there, and I will take that to the documentation interest group. In fact, I've already shared it with them. And I've got a few notes just to plan it in there. And again, any format's fine. My notes that are on this shared doc have some screenshots and that sort of thing, but don't feel like you have to do that. Any kind of feedback about things that need updating is certainly appreciated. And Debbie, I think you're here. I was just talking on and on. Do you want to talk about this project?
No, I think you did a great job. Thanks.
You're welcome. I think I'm stumbling over my words, but yeah, the sentiment is that we're working on cleaning up the documentation, and please help.
Yes. And making sure that it's complete.
Mm-hmm. And our topic today is one of those where it is not complete, so that should be one of our outcomes, I believe, is documenting holdings templates and how they work, and the holdings editor screen. Okay, but that's a foreshadowing. And I've already mentioned the reports interest group meets next Thursday, is meeting monthly now. And if you missed the reports interest group in February, as I did, there are slides on the topic of nullability in reports, which is very useful for anybody that's ever worked with a report and wanted to know what nullability was and how that might work. I would suggest checking that out because the presentation really is very good. I missed the live presentation, but I've reviewed the slides and they're great. Before I move on and open our plan topic for today, anybody from any of the other interest groups want to promote anything they're working on, or just say hello? Let's see what else is here. Okay, well, feel free to chime in at any time. And like I said, Dev will meet after us, so we'll bring back any information we hear from them. All righty. Launchpad bugs, this standing agenda item is where sometimes we will pull out specific launchpads that we want, launchpad bugs that we want to highlight too. This always stays here, just again, if you're new or if you've only been with us a few times, this just kind of stays here as a time where you can look at launchpad bugs that are out there. These are grouped together. There's that whole comprehensive list of all the different tags to help you search by tag on a launchpad bug kind of category. There are links out there for the new bugs, cataloging bugs, stop catalog. Don't have any specific there. I do have a few specific ones related to Evergreen Holdings templates. But again, this is always that place. If you want to take time during our meetings to check out some of those, please feel free. I am never insulted. If you want to just spend your time while we're together looking at Launchpad bugs, that's an excellent thing to do. And so please feel free to also use the listserv, as so many of us do. Just when you find a bug that you feel needs some discussion on the listserv, send that around, or just you want to add heat, meaning you want to indicate that the bug affects people and affects the community larger than just the person that's reporting the bug. Please feel free to use the listserv for that, as always. Just say, check out this bug, it needs heat or it needs discussion. And again, we're not going to try to pull out anything not related to holdings templates unless we have time at the end, and then we can certainly allow time for the open forum afterwards. And that was my very quick run through announcements. Anything anybody else wants to bring to the group before I start talking about Evergreen Holdings templates? I have a few slides, but I'll just pause and have a sip of tea. Let's see if anybody else wants to add to the agenda. Okay, let's move on. Evergreen Holdings templates. This is something I'm actually quite a fan of. A huge advocate for using holdings templates. We're not raising this topic today in any kind of criticism. Instead, we're looking at how we can make them even better. So as I put in the note that went out, the organizing committee met, and we think that this is one of those things that right now, I asked the question, did we think this is the right time to talk about it, or is it absolutely the right time to talk about it? And we came together as consensus, really, that this is absolutely the right time to talk about it. And let me tell you why I raised that question. It's because in 3.8, there are a few books to deal with the current functionality of Evergreen Holdings templates and how they're currently working. Not necessarily any new functionality that was attempted to be added, but just because they've been ported to Angular along with that Angular Holdings maintenance screen, or the old volume copy editor screen. It goes by many names. So I've got a few slides that will kind of walk us through current functionality, and I didn't see anybody's note in the chat saying they don't use them currently, so I'm not going to spend but so much time on that. I really do want us to start just spending our time together talking about anybody that is on 3.8, what your experience has been, and make sure that we're getting all of that noted, and that we're continuing that into Launchpad as well, and making sure that all of our notes are reflected there, and I'll certainly do that after our meeting. But not only that, but then also to say what else would we want holdings templates to do, and how could they be more useful, more beneficial. So that's really our goal for today. And then our end goal after this conversation, after my slides, is to kind of reach a potential set of requirements together. Now, this doesn't mean that we're saying this is particularly how it needs to be recoded. And I know that sounds like a very juvenile way to say that, but to be, to take to a developer and tell them this is exactly what they need to do, but instead say, as end users, this is what would be more beneficial to us and what would make the holdings templates more robust And kind of as a community, these are the things we've talked about and agreed upon that we would like. So it's not just coming from, my singular personality and opinion, that it's really more of a thing that we do as a community. And it's one of the things we've talked about doing around several topics. And I'd really like for this one to be one that we can take forward into the conference and use some time at the conference and to kind of finalize our conversations that we're starting today. So that's my end goal. And our end goal from the organizing committee out of this conversation is to put us on that path forward so that we can help shape that come June. I also will say, Columbo, one more thing. Next month in April, Bill Erickson is going to join us to talk about the Angular staff catalog in general. So we can talk with him a little more about holdings templates when he's here and pose some of our thoughts, some of our conversations. We can summarize those with him next month. And then we can also next month be prepared to ask him any questions we have about kind of the status of the Angular staff catalog, share our input, share our bravos and our questions. So that's next month. But for now, let's start with holdings templates. I'll just run through this really quick slideshow here. I will share these afterwards and put the link to them on the agenda, on the notes. So holdings templates, since I don't see anybody that isn't using them, I don't have to do this whole definition. Holdings template is used to save a group of attributes. You can just apply all the item attributes together for a single item or multiple items. Anywhere you're adding or editing items, those templates are available. We'll note, going back through the history of the different versions of Evergreen, they've been called item templates, copy templates, volume copy templates. All of those things mean the same thing. And if I'm incorrect about any of this, I'm counting on the organizing committee members too, or anyone to call me out. Mary Llewellyn, copy template is still used in serials. Mary, do you think that's something that we should change to be item template to keep it consistent with everything else? Or holdings template? See, I can't even get that right. Copy template. In serials, I'm taking notes so we can add at the end. Too confusing. Got it. So some things don't need to be changed. They do have a slightly different function. And Mary raises a good point. I'm watching Mary's notes in chat that copy templates and serials do indeed have a slightly different function. And I believe that's something we should cover after this. Yeah, they are another whole ball of wax. And we're getting on the survey that, not to digress too much, survey that quite a few people want to talk about serials. So we should definitely pick that up too. I do think it's worth noting as we're going through this about the differences in serials and their copy templates, though, so that when we're putting together, summarizing our thoughts and our discussions, that makes it in there, that we agree that it's just different. Okay. It's worth repeating currently the holdings template ownership tied to a login, so they're available on a workstation or laptop for that login only, which is one of the things that we would like to see changed. But right now they can be shared. You export from one login to import to another. And when you export, it takes all of your templates into one file. And when you import them, it brings them all back in. And existing templates are kept and new ones are added. So it doesn't wipe out everything that's there and replace it. It just overlays and adds. But it only overlays if they have exactly the same name. So if you've renamed one of your juvenile fiction templates to juvenile fic, then you're now going to have two. So I think we've probably encountered that before trying to work with moving sets of templates around. Benefits, that's what most of us have worked with templates already. Pre-selected values for call numbers and item attributes, so you don't have to fill in every one of those boxes every time. Saves time, minimizes errors, ensures consistency. It's nice that they can be created and edited through the staff catalog. I think that's really nice that we have access to do that ourselves. Gives us a lot of flexibility, and we're empowered to make that kind of change that really helps our daily lives. And of course, you can have multiple templates, different formats, different locations, and other circulation identifiers. Even though they all go in one master set, you can have, I don't know that I've ever encountered a limit on the number of templates you can have. Clearly, you can make them very complicated, but it's best to keep them simple and then just have more as you need them. Okay, creating and editing holdings templates. I'm going to I'm going to go over to 3.8 in a moment, and we can then be looking at it all together. Same place. And if you want to log into the community server there, if you need a demo server for 3.8, you can do that too. The holdings templates are there. But right now there are two different places, and there have been for a while, that you can create and edit holdings templates. You can do this through local admin, local admin, the holdings template editor, what's called a standalone template editor, because it stands alone. And then there's the second one where you just have to open any old bib record and get to the holdings editor through a bib record and go to the item templates tab on any of the previously called copy templates. As if you were adding or editing an item. Whether you need to add or edit an item or all, it does live there, the item templates. Either way, once you get to the screen where you are adding or editing a template, to create one, you just enter all the values that you need, name it, save it, both things. It's a little different in the new 3.8. It's going back to the old way. You have to make sure you click apply. So you have to select the attribute, click apply for each one of them, but we'll look at that in a moment. But in general, that's really it. You just, open the screen, set all your values and click save. And then to use them in the holdings editor, any way you get to the holdings editor, you just find the template, click apply. Everything's updated. You can make more changes other than just what's in the template. And I know I'm going quickly, but this isn't a how to use templates. This is just background information. Okay, and a quick, just for future purposes, I wanted to make sure we had all of this stored in one place. The holdings template editor, which lives under local admin, has looked the same, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it has looked the same for 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8. I didn't go back any further than that. And it is a standalone editor. So you just simply add your title, you name your template here, and then update all your little boxes and click save. And this screen has looked pretty much the same. And here is the holdings editor on the item templates tab. And it was called item templates in 3.6 and 3.7. And it had 3 tabs on the holdings maintenance screen, or the holdings editor screen that's there. And on the item templates tab is where it lived in 3.6 and 3.7. And so you just named your template here. This is where you created them. If you were editing an item, all that happened on that edit tab. And I don't have a 3.6 or 3.7 version of the database prompted to pull up. I can if we want that for the discussion. But so all your editing happened over here. If you on that edit tab, if you needed to create a new item template, you came over here and created it, and then went back to the edit tab to apply it. So that's hopefully a fair representation. Of course, I didn't put all the item attributes. That's just a snapshot there of what it looked like in 3.6 and 3.7. Then we moved to 3.8, and now we have 2 possible views that live there, because you can have, again, I'm in the holdings editor, you can have the unified holdings and item attributes display. This is controlled by a preference that's on the preferences tab. If you use the unified holdings, all this lives on the holdings tab, all this being your call number attributes and your item attributes. So there's your call number line, and then all your item attributes underneath. And then here's your template. And here's your template for creating them and for applying them, and for editing them. All of that lives in this place now, instead of having one tab for editing and one tab for going over and doing something with your templates and then coming back. It's embedded again. If you choose not to use the unified holdings display and you choose to just leave them separate, which is what it does by default, you have 2 tabs, one for holdings and one for item attributes. The difference is holdings, and I will demo this here in a moment. The difference is holdings is just that call number, well, it's just that holdings attributes, classification, call number, label, barcode. And then item attributes is all your item attributes, but that's where your template lives if you choose to keep these separate. And again, that's a preference that's made for your workstation. All right, so that's background of where we are in 3.8 and a couple of different options that live there. So we end up with, our templates are embedded on our holdings maintenance screen. Provided some nice documentation there. And as Debbie and I both mentioned, documentation does need updating, especially for this, and especially for the holdings templates and for the holdings maintenance screen. Let me pause. I keep saying this in 3 different ways. I call it the holdings maintenance screen, the holdings editor screen, and the volume copy editor, because that's what is everybody else using when they're talking about the screen where you go in and you add items or you edit items? I just want to make sure that I'm using language that's the rest of it. Item editor, that works. Trying to stick with holdings editor. Okay. I just want to make sure I am not confusing matters by changing my terminology. Holdings editor. Okay. Thanks. And I believe holdings editor is great. And Andrea, Debbie, either one. I believe holdings editor is what official documentation is using now. Is that right? I'm just falling back on bad habits. Well, I can look that up too. Yeah, okay, Andrea's going to check on that. So while Andrea checks on that, here's a link. I could just check on that myself. Nope, we're going to let Andrea do it while I keep talking. Thank you. Here's a link to the latest documentation. There's a link to Pines has some nice best practices in addition to their documentation about holdings templates. This is the way that I believe, Elaine, that it worked before 3.8. And then Sitka also has some nice documentation that is updated with 3.8.
I have not updated mine yet.
Yeah, nor will we expect you to. Not at all. So I just want to give 2 different samples there. They're both really great. And there's a lot to be learned there beyond just the process, but also best practices for working with them. Anybody else has documentation they want to share, please do. But those are really great examples. All righty, here's where the conversation starts. And I'm going to go over to, I'm going to post these up. You know what? Let me share the slides with everybody so that I can then demo Evergreen and everybody will have a link to this. So I'm going to put these in the chat box and then I will also put them on the agenda so that when I go over to Evergreen, you can keep looking at Launchpad bugs. Okay. So we'll talk about a couple of these and then I'll demo. If you want to see all Launchpad bugs that are based on templates, this isn't all holdings templates. It's all templates that have deal with cataloging, but they're there if you want to click on them. Here are the biggest bugs that have been discovered in 3.8, and we're looking at 3.8 because clearly any development going forward would build upon current functionality. First issue that's been found is Angular Holdings Maintenance does not successfully retrieve AngularJS item templates. This is the first thing that I believe, gosh, Elaine, was it you? And I know Sitka was working with it too, that you really couldn't do anything with holdings templates until this patch is applied.
That's true.
Okay.
You're dead in the water without that patch.
Yeah, it kind of just sits there, and because when I was testing it too, it just, yeah, nothing at all.
You couldn't even create new ones.
Right, not at all. You couldn't apply them, you couldn't create them, nothing. So there is a patch that's available, and it's already been released to the community in as much as the patch, the information about the patch is available in the Launchpad bug that Bill Erickson created for us. So it's something your system administrators could use already and put in place for you so that you can still use holdings templates. So at least that patch is there. And I would make the presumption that it would be included in any next release in 3.8.1, but that's just a presumption at this point. But the Launchpad bug number is there, so you can kind of monitor that. We'll certainly keep an eye on it and test it again through bug squashing when the time comes. Going back to check Andrea's notes here, the docs do use the term holdings editor, but it's earlier vintage, definitely. Definitely needs updating. Okay, thanks for checking, Andrea. So now that was the first one. So there's a patch available. That's a good thing to know. And then these others, the next 3 here, I do not believe have patches available. The second one there, the new holdings templates don't automatically display in holdings editor. I was testing that again yesterday and today, and that's just true. You create one and it doesn't show until you log out and you log back in. And as far as from my testing, it looks like that's true whether you create them through the holdings editor or whether you create them through the standalone editor. Does anybody else noticed any different functionality with one place for creating them versus another?
I haven't been able to successfully create a template within the holdings editor, but
Yeah.
Jennifer Pringle posted something that I just haven't had time to test. So
Yeah, that's what I think that, well, you know what, that's probably where I am too, because I just was testing again, well, this morning, and when I was trying to do it through the holdings editor, it looks like it saves, but it doesn't. I was going to see what the latest note is here on. She said she had created in the holdings editor, it didn't automatically. Okay, we'll keep working on that.
there's another bug I think about them not creating, not being that I did about them not being able to create in the holdings editor. That she
Okay.
could,
Let me find that one.
that she could get it, and I don't remember now what she did.
Okay, I'll look for that one and then add. If anybody can find that one while I'm talking, that'd be great. I'll add it. If not, I'll look for it after. Trying to put them all in one place for the known bugs. Separate bug. Okay. And one of these has led to this conversation that I also want to have as a group. This bug was created, is kind of a prompt to create a standalone holdings template editor. Out of one of these bugs, I think it's probably this first one. Conversation started where the idea was to do away with the standalone holdings template editor from a development standpoint. In my understanding is that's because right now they're really being maintained in two different places, and trying to keep the two synchronized is what's causing a lot of the problems that we're seeing. The standalone holdings template editor is not yet in Angular. So to keep it, it has to be ported to Angular, which requires development work. And the question came back to us about, do you really need it? Well, we chose to answer that question, I will say, through the development about that. I don't think we were ready to let go of a standalone holdings template yet, to let it be just deprecated completely and only do the creating item templates or creating holdings templates through the bib records and the items that we like having that standalone holdings template editor. So that's what this bug is kind of that indication that there is desire in the community to keep a standalone holdings template editor and to make it work in Angular. My next few slides are I'm going to keep notes on the wish list, the things we want. So I'll hop over there, and I'd really like to get feedback about others, because I know what several of us had a conversation about how important this really is, but I'd like to hear input from others too about retaining that standalone template editor. And the last one I pulled out of here is this holdings template with an item alert, break save. It just stops. You're just dead in the water if you try to create a holdings template with an item alert. And I can't get any further than that to keep testing. I guess there really isn't anything to test. Once you put an item alert on it and click save, it just doesn't do anything. So these are the biggest things that I found. Anything else in 3.8 anybody else has seen that we want to make sure we capture on our list? Just to let people know that aren't yet on 3.8, and that the things we might be looking to test for 3.8.1, hopefully. Well, everybody should have access to edit these slides too. We'll just treat it as a community notes there. If you want to add anything to it, please do. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I am going to go over to Evergreen so we can all be looking at the holdings editor alone. And then I am going to move these slides out of the way once I do that. And so that we can keep reviewing them together. Everybody has access to the slides now. And I'll just walk through these questions one at a time. So, holdings editor. Let's look at it first. This is on 3.8 sandbox that I have. Holdings template editor. Okay, So here's the Holdings template editor. This is the standalone. So the first question is, we're making notes about why it's useful to have a standalone Holdings template editor outside of having to access it through the bib record and through an item, through the Holdings editor to edit items. Can we enunciate why, which is word for me today, I'm stumbling all over the words, but can we be specific about why it's useful to have a standalone Holdings template editor? Other than it's certainly easier to create multiples at one time.
Yeah, it's a more efficient workflow because when you're maintaining your templates, it is independent of your record.
Yep.
So you don't need to have to go through a bib record and then holdings to access it. You should be able to access those holdings templates directly.
Yep. Definitely. Okay. I would also say I don't know how to say this without just without simple language, but I say it's easier to not make mistakes in this one than it is that if you're on an item in that Holdings editor with a particular item, all kinds of things can go wrong. You know, you can have applied something and they're already pre-existing values, and you have to make sure that you're getting everything you write. The display is cleaner and easier to not mess up. And I need to come up with a better way to say that, but
reduces errors.
See, I knew you would know. It reduces errors. Certainly. And it keeps me from applying one to an item that I didn't mean to just because I had to be on an item screen. Darcy, it seems more intuitive to have a standalone editor. It's not necessarily intuitive to start from a DIB record. No, it's not. Yep. And Andrew's right. Standalone, you're just doing templates. Yep. So focused. Independent action. More intuitive. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. These are all great. If I could spell the word intuitive.
It would also be a regression. Because in this old client, we initially didn't have a standalone editor. And it was extremely frustrating when all you wanted to do was edit one single thing in one single template, and you had to go through that. You had to call up a bib record, get an item, look at your holdings, you get that template.
Oh, it was. And you had to make sure you clicked everything in exactly the right order. Oh,
and then like you say, didn't accidentally apply it.
Right. Okay. See, Marie even agrees with this. Yeah, accidentally changed templates by misclicking the Holdings editor. Right. Yeah, the addition of the item attribute editor and tool was, yeah, it really was nice. Okay.
Well, I would argue we need more standalone editors for templates, not less. We need one for the spine label templates.
Okay, I'm trying to keep notes on these slides too here. I moved that second question. Okay. Need more standalone templates like spine labels. Absolutely. We'll let this be the first successful mounting of the hill of standalone templates. Okay. Fantastic. Alrighty. Standalone editor. I'm not hearing anybody who thinks that we should not have a standalone template. So nobody is taking the negative on this side. Okay. Total consensus. That's not consensus. That's unanimous. Okay.
Well, I want to just one more thing.
Sure.
It also makes Evergreen more useful, and if we're trying to market it as a tool to compete against vendor ILSs, I think that having this kind of usability is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yes, because from the standpoint of training, which I do a lot more of too, I couldn't agree more, because you have to say, okay, you go to any bib record, doesn't matter which, just grab a bib record and then an item, and that's where you can create your item templates. But yeah, it certainly is. Let me see Chrissy's. If you're looking for the other side, I don't think I've ever used a standalone. That's okay, Chrissy. Yeah, it's glad to hear people who don't use a standalone. It also says to me you have a really good set of templates that don't need a lot of tweaking. So that's fantastic, which is the way they really should work. Get a really good set of templates and you don't have to worry. Have to create new ones all the time. All right, let's move on. A few more questions I had just together. One of the biggest complaints, and we can do this for all friends, one of the biggest complaints here is that they are stored locally, and sharing them is clunky, to be generous about that. So I think one of my next one is kind of things that we'd like to see is we'd be able for them not to be shared locally, not to be able to store it locally rather, so that we could set them at whatever organizational depth we wanted to, whether we wanted to be able to share them just with our branch or within our system or within the consortium, so that we're all using the same templates for all the reasons we say that templates are a great thing, holdings templates. They would be even better served by being able to apply that consistency by not making everybody have to import and export their templates. I'm reading Chrissy's note here too. So migrated from Soul to Web, we did have to remake every one of them. Ooh, yeah, it would have been helpful to have had the holdings. Yep. Chrissy's note here reminds me that the importance of documentation really is, once we have a little time to get back to that, I think just documenting current functionality is extremely important. And then as we go forward to documenting changes. Thanks, Chrissy. Okay, anybody else notes about how to strengthen the argument about why, argument's the wrong word, but to strengthen our thoughts on being able to have these not stored locally?
It makes easy. Makes it a lot easier too if you get a new workstation, new computer, new workstation, if you have new staff. But I think the best argument for me is a consistency across a library system, so that everybody is using the same templates. I know we have one system that people are using different templates, and it's been almost impossible for the manager there, cataloging manager there, has been impossible to get her staff to use the same template.
Yeah.
So if they were stored, whatever magical way it is that they're stored, so that they can be available at different depths, I think that would be just really, really useful. Yeah. That would be a very, very big help just in managing a tech services department and everything. And somebody hasn't gone rogue on their template.
How would that work when you do have different staff members with different groups of templates? How would that get merged together?
I think that probably leads us into our next wish list item. I think I'm going to keep taking notes here. Our next, I think, about here not being able to compartmentalize them. So can you explain a little more about, just so that we all have the same example, about different staff having different templates on purpose and why they're needed?
Well, you might have the children's department have their own set of templates. You might have two people in the adult department just worked independently and created their own sets. So they may or may not match. And then, so if you're merging them, how do you decide who wins?
Which kind of brings, I just brought my notes back over here so you see we don't all need to be looking at that screenshot of the holdings template editor. Okay, so consistency is where we were here. I think this is where we were capturing your comments exactly. We can't really compartmentalize them for specific use right now. It's all or nothing. So if we had the ability to have a set of children's templates and a set of sets of whatever we want, subsets, that then we could then share those either at whatever org depth we needed to, whether it was just a branch or even just a permission group. And I haven't made a note on here about permissions at all, but that's kind of getting into the weeds of how to make it happen. I think being able to separate them is key. Let me make a note here about, like, be able to save, but just, and also have subsets.
Well, couldn't you have it, in addition to having it like consortial level, system level, branch level, login level? So if you had people who, maybe only catalog children's material, I think it still would be worthwhile to have it where it was accessible to everybody in one sense, but not like if I didn't catalog children's material, I wouldn't need to see it in my list. But as the cataloging manager, I would not be able to have access to it. So if I needed somebody else, if that person who was cataloging children's materials left, got a new computer, whatever, it would still be at a managerial level, still be able to make sure it got assigned to the correct person, if that makes any kind of sense.
So if we make it configurable to assign templates to certain staff.
Well, I don't think we're talking necessarily about, we're not talking about combining templates, but we're talking about having them stored in such a way that they're accessible based on how that org unit has set up, the level of is set up, either by, like in Pines, we would never want them accessible. Well, I don't, as of now, we would not want them accessible consortium wide. It would be system or branch. We do we do some cataloging branch level. It's kind of discouraged, and it's only the Cat 2 cataloging. But certainly we would want it available system, but it would I guess I'm thinking of this. It would combine some, but I think what you would need to do is make sure if you didn't want them to combine that they were named differently before this process went through.
Oh, certainly.
Because I would say then that probably any kind of process to make this happen, if the templates were named the same, one would override the other. So that would be a consideration to think about.
Yeah. And I'm looking back at Anita's note. Evergreen, Indiana has 130 libraries determining the attributes for their own library. In that case, I guess what we're saying here is each of those 130 libraries could have their own attributes for their library. That would just be their set of, if we're talking about storing them locally, it just means every individual person doesn't have to have them stored on their computer. Just means everybody, so at library A, everybody at library A has the same set of templates. Everybody at library B has the same set all the way up through all 130.
Consortium level wouldn't work for us because all our libraries have their own sets of shelving locations. So you can't have a template for adult fiction that belongs to everybody.
Well, that's true in Pines too. We even have it down to the branch level. So I think that's and that's a problem with Holdings Editor right now. But
yeah, so if we're saying just depending on what the needs are, which it sounds like we all would have slightly different needs, especially across consortia. But if you could configure it to say, okay, these templates are just for this branch, these set of templates are just for this system, or these are for the whole consortium, depending on how your cataloging workflow is set up. So it's really a matter of if you could make it configurable to be used at whatever sharing depth you wanted to. Sounds like maybe that, we'd have to decide how permissions get assigned and all of that kind of stuff, but at least as far as saving them are what we're talking about now. About, do you just save it on your workstation, or is it saved where somebody else can see it? And who's that somebody else that can see it?
These are all great points, though. I think that
they really are.
Yeah.
Let's see, Melanie, our templates were a mess from multiple editions by various catalogers over the years. I saved the old ones to a file, then recreated them all from scratch to make sure we're all using the same templates. See, that's what we like to reduce so that you don't have to do that every time staff changes. But we have one department that handles cataloging for the system. Yeah. System level would work best. Yeah. Subdivided. And we've got some talk there about setting up access by permission group. So that's something we've asked the question here about how would we share the subsets if we have subsets that we were talking about. So that's a question for us.
Well, and I would definitely say you would have to be a cataloger or a library admin to access cataloging templates.
Yep. But then what about subsets of cataloging templates? How would we assign those?
I would still argue that.
Okay.
I mean, because even if you're, I mean, it sounds like people are allowing non-catalogers to catalog, but they still have to have cataloging permissions to do that.
Yep. See, I'm just wondering, and I know that we're coming up top of the hour. This is how we know that this is going to take several conversations, right? But I'm wondering, for example, if what was the example that we were given that, if you just wanted children's templates. So how do I make sure that librarian, Bob only has children's templates and librarian Sally only has adult templates? They both have access to templates because they're catalogers.
Maybe that means you have to have sort of a, not being a developer and not understanding these things. Perhaps when you're setting up what your templates you're pulling, you would be able to choose main templates, adult, whatever subgroups you set up, then you could go in, and if you needed all, you would get all of them. If you just needed main, you just get main. If you needed children's and main, like that, so that you have radio buttons or something that would allow you to choose from these sets and subsets of templates.
Yeah, I see Anita's question there too, really cautioning us not to make it harder than it needs to be, which I think is a fair caution too. I think making sure we address this question though with developers when we have the opportunity to do that is just to say, here's what we would like, is we'd like to be able to configure them so that some people only have this and some people only have that. Or even where I think you were going there, Elaine, is that much like those fields that we can hide, and now on the holdings editor screen, we say if we don't use all of those, we simply turn them off. If we could do the same thing here, if you don't use this particular one, then just turn them off.
Right, and that would also allow you, if I had a huge order of children's material and everybody's going to have to do children's materials, I can go in and have access to those templates.
Yep. And Andrea says, why not both? Able to assign template access to either permission group plus working location and or specific users. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye, Andrea. Thanks for being here. I know it's top of the hour. We're going to start losing people too. And again, this is the reason we knew this was going to take longer than one conversation. I think what I'd like to, let me see what some of the other questions are here. I love our conversation so far. That was talking about compartmentalizing, which we've spent a bit on here. Also, we wanted to make sure that we're able to do, it's not an all or nothing thing. I think that just kind of goes without saying. That's one of the things we've been talking about for a while. It'd be nice not to have to export everything every time or import everything all the time, that we'd have, again, a selection. If we could do just one or multiple ones or all. I want to see what Mary, non-evergreen solution would be to export to a shared drive within the library and let staff grab the list from there. Certainly, that's something you can do right now. Be able to do that. Great suggestion for now. Okay, yep, I think we're losing people. So I will continue to take our notes here. And I think the last one here was about being able to delete. That kind of goes through that one. So I would just ask you to review notes when they come back out and add to them as you're continuing to think about this and continuing to use holding templates. And we will continue this conversation as a community. Perhaps next week with Bill Erickson, we'll see what else we might want to talk about with him, and I'll organize us to get ready for that conversation too. This is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording now. I'll hang around for another 10 minutes or so before I have to jet. If anybody wants to keep talking, I'm just honoring your time for the 1 hour. And again, thanks to all. The recording will be out soon. Notes will be ready by the end of the day. See you next month.